Welcome back to Legacy Contracts, and if this is your first time here, we're glad you found us. This channel exists for attorneys who sense that something beneath the surface of their firm isn't quite working, even if it's hard to name. Here, we look beyond surface-level efficiency and into the invisible systems shaping how your firm operates, serves clients, and sustains growth. Through practical insight and honest conversation, we help bring clarity to what's often overlooked, so you can lead with intention, not assumption. If you're interested in building a law firm that's not just functional but thoughtfully designed, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Today's conversation focuses on a question many managing partners eventually ask themselves. Is it time to hire a chief operating officer? For many firms, that question arrives during a period of growth. The caseload has increased. The team has expanded. Leadership feels pulled into every conversation. Employees need constant direction. Projects move more slowly than they should. Everything seems to require partner involvement. At that point, hiring a COO often feels like the obvious next step, and sometimes it is. But before making that investment, there's another question worth asking. Has the firm built the operational structure that allows a COO to succeed? Because if the underlying structure hasn't been intentionally designed, a COO doesn't solve the problem. They inherit it. Today, we'd like to walk through 5 structural areas every law firm should evaluate before deciding whether adding another executive is truly the next step. Part 1. Clarify decision ownership. One of the simplest questions we ask during operational assessments is surprisingly difficult for many firms to answer. Who owns this decision? Not who usually answers it, not who answered it last week, not who has historically stepped in. Who actually owns it? That distinction matters far more than most firms realize. In many growing law firms, decision ownership develops organically rather than intentionally. One partner begins approving billing adjustments because they happen to be available. Another attorney becomes responsible for client escalations because they've always handled them. An office manager starts answering intake questions simply because that's how it evolved. Eventually, these patterns become accepted as the way we've always done it. But inherited habits are not the same thing as operational design. When ownership isn't clearly assigned, employees naturally look upward for confirmation. Questions get escalated. Approvals multiply. Routine work slows while everyone waits for someone else's decision. Over time, leadership becomes the firm's default routing system, not because they intended to, because no other pathway was ever documented. Before adding another executive layer, it's worth examining where decisions currently live. Ask questions like, which decisions return to leadership every week? Which ones could be owned elsewhere? Are approval thresholds documented? Does everyone know where authority begins and ends? Sometimes what feels like a leadership capacity issue is actually an ownership issue. And ownership can often be redesigned long before another executive becomes necessary. Part 2. Make responsibility visible. The second area worth evaluating is responsibility. Notice we didn't say accountability. Accountability gets discussed constantly inside organizations. Responsibility often doesn't. Most firms assume everyone understands what they're responsible for, but assumptions don't create clarity. Responsibilities evolve. People help each other. Employees temporarily fill gaps. New software changes workflows. Someone leaves, someone else steps in. Months later, the organization is operating on memory rather than documentation. Eventually, nobody can confidently answer questions like, who owns this process? Who follows up? Who ensures completion? Who protects the outcome? Without visible responsibility, work becomes duplicated. Tasks fall through the cracks. Employees unintentionally overlap each other's efforts. Leadership starts checking everyone's work, not because they want to, but because uncertainty makes oversight feel necessary. One question we encourage firms to ask is this: has responsibility been made visible enough for someone to succeed independently? That's a very different question than asking who's accountable. Visibility creates confidence. Confidence creates consistency. Consistency reduces interruptions. The clearer responsibilities become, the less leadership has to manage through constant supervision. Part 3. Stop relying on leadership's memory. Another pattern we frequently observe has nothing to do with staffing. It has everything to do with institutional knowledge. Inside many law firms, critical operational information exists almost entirely inside people's heads. Managing partners remember which client prefers email instead of phone calls, which vendor responds fastest, which attorney likes pleadings formatted a certain way, which judge prefers specific filing practices, which matters require unique handling. That experience is incredibly valuable. But it's also fragile. Whenever important knowledge exists only in one person's memory, the organization becomes dependent on that individual. Growth becomes difficult, training takes longer, transitions become disruptive, and every absence creates uncertainty. Operational systems exist to preserve knowledge. They make information findable, repeatable, transferable. A COO shouldn't spend months uncovering information that already exists inside leadership's memory. That work should already belong to the organization itself. The stronger your documentation becomes, the faster any future operations leader can begin improving the business instead of reconstructing it. Part 4. Measure the structure, not just the results. Law firms are already excellent at measuring outcomes. Revenue, billable hours, collections, case volume, utilization, those metrics matter, but they don't always explain why performance looks the way it does. Operational health requires measuring something different: structural friction. Instead of only reviewing financial performance, consider tracking questions like: where do approvals consistently slow down? Which decisions repeatedly return to leadership? Which workflows pause whenever one employee is unavailable? Which employees experience the highest number of daily interruptions? How many recurring questions are answered more than once every week? Those measurements tell a different story. They reveal where the firm's structure, not its people, is creating unnecessary effort. When firms begin measuring structural health alongside financial performance, operational improvements become much easier to prioritize, because now leadership isn't reacting to symptoms. They're addressing causes. Part 5. Design escalation before expansion. Finally, before hiring additional leadership, evaluate how work escalates throughout the organization. Every law firm encounters problems. Healthy firms simply know where those problems belong. Employees understand who owns the issue, what decisions they can make independently, what requires consultation, what should be escalated, and when leadership actually needs to become involved. Without those pathways, uncertainty fills the gaps. Employees ask, leadership answers. The work moves forward. At first, it seems efficient, but eventually every exception, every approval, and every question flows back to the managing partner, not because leadership is the only person capable of solving the problem, because the organization never documented another route. Escalation should be intentional, not automatic. A well-designed escalation framework protects leadership from becoming the destination for every uncertainty. That's one of the most valuable operational investments a growing firm can make. So, does your law firm need a COO? Maybe. Many firms absolutely do. But a COO should never become the solution for structural uncertainty. They should become someone who strengthens an already intentional operational framework. Think of it this way: a COO amplifies structure. They don't replace it. If decision ownership is unclear today, a COO inherits uncertainty. If responsibilities haven't been documented, a COO inherits inconsistency. If institutional knowledge lives inside leadership's memory, A COO spends valuable time rebuilding information that should already exist inside the organization. The stronger your operational architecture becomes, the more valuable every future leadership role becomes. Because sustainable growth has never been about adding more people. It's about building better systems. If today's conversation resonated with you, we invite you to explore the additional resources available through legacy contracts. Our articles, videos, and operational tools are designed to help managing partners identify the structural patterns that quietly create unnecessary leadership burden and build systems that support long-term, sustainable growth. If you found this discussion valuable, consider subscribing for more conversations about legal operations, organizational design, and building law firms that can grow with greater clarity and less dependency on constant leadership intervention. We hope today's insight helped bring clarity to something that may have been operating quietly in the background of your firm. Progress doesn't always start with doing more. It often starts with seeing more clearly. Law firms aren't built overnight. They're shaped by the decisions you make once the invisible becomes visible. This is Legacy Contracts, and until next time, keep leading with clarity.